This is a coronavirus presentation based on analysis that my husband Will Fellows and I did over the last few weeks. So Will, do you want to talk a little about the chart that we used?
Yes, this is the U.S. Sibley chart. We like the Sibley chart, even though there's 3 or 4 other types of charts. The Sibley chart does vary between 8 and 12 degrees Sagittarius. But we've been using the 12 degree, 21 minute Sagittarius rising one. But I've gotten some information that which I will present next year, that somebody went into the records and it may be a little earlier than that, which would put Uranus closer to the 7th house cusp, or right on the 7th house cusp. But as I always say about the Sibley chart, it's just a marvelous chart because the 7th house is so dynamic, and if it's a little earlier, Uranus is conjunct or an angular position on the 7th house cusp, and we've been, the beacon of the world. We're the first, first constitutional republic. It shows that 7th house, that we're the world leader with Jupiter and Venus, the both benefics conjunct in the 7th house. We have Neptune in the 9th, where we're a country that the whole world looks to, and people from all over the world have come here and settled on these shores. Saturn's in the 10th house, which I like too, because we've been a country that's had to have great responsibilities and challenges. And with Saturn in its exaltation in Libra in the 10th house, we have risen to that particular, responsibility. And then the other one, which we'll be seeing a lot tonight, because Pluto is in the 2nd house in Capricorn, and we are in a time when Pluto and many planets are in Capricorn. Pluto has been the dominant energy and vibration in our charts, having up to at least 4 planets, 3 to 4 planets conjuncting and going over Pluto, affecting the finances, and we'll say the economic health of the country. And also we'll show later on there's other factors in it. So I like the Sibley chart. The Aquarian moon sits nicely in the 3rd house, because we are a country of communications, dynamic transportation. Most of the great transportation and communication leaps have been done by the United States. Okay.
So we've decided to break the presentation up into 3 sections. The first one is the financial impact, mostly because I like money, of coronavirus and some of the things there. Then we have a section actually on sort of the medical, the epidemic aspects of it. And then we have a small section on political, because all 3 of those components really have affected us with the coronavirus. But we'll start off with the financial impact, mostly because, as Will just mentioned, we have so many planets transiting in Capricorn right now, and that hits some of our financial houses.
They see us on the video.
So these are the financial houses, and they mostly it's the 2nd and the 8th, which should sound somewhat familiar to people who are used to natal astrology. Those tend to be the money houses. But in addition, the 5th house is the stock market, because it involves risk. And then the 11th is the money supply, and the 10th is the economy. So I would say, if you look at this, the 2nd house represents more of the wealth of the people. And then the 8th house represents things more global, more public, taxes, public monies, national debt, things like that. So I looked at the stock market since, I guess, really the beginning of February for the most part, because I wanted to see what was going on with the stock market and where all the inflection points were, and get an idea if any of this would show up when we started looking at the transits against the Sibley chart. So we had on February 12th, the highest closing record for the Dow Jones Industrial Average. We were almost at 30,000. So that's on February 12th. And then around February 23rd, the average dropped 11% and 12%. And it was a big shakeup driven by the global worries about the coronavirus impact and what that would do both on the economy and corporate profits. Then we had another inflection point around March 24th, where the Dow rallied over 11%, which was a big point gain. And so that was kind of when we started to rebound to some degree. We're not at the heights that we were at before, but the market, while it goes up and down and is still very volatile, at this point right now, it seems to be somewhat more stable than it was a few weeks ago. I'm not saying it's going to stay that way because we have a lot of stuff going on with Jupiter and Saturn right now, but at the moment, we're a little bit more stable. So looking at the astrology of that, and Will, you can jump in whenever you want here. We had a couple of interesting things that we saw. So this is a bi-wheel, and the way a bi-wheel works is you put the chart for the United States in the center. That's the US Sibley chart that Will showed you a couple slides ago. And then you wrap the transits around it and match them up. So you align them with what's going on in the Sibley chart. So you can see what transiting planets are interacting with various planets in the Sibley chart. So just looking at this first chart, which was around the 23rd, there was one thing that really hit me right away, which was that Saturn at 27 degrees Capricorn was directly conjuncting Pluto in the second house, which for all intents and purposes represents the people's money. So this is where we started to see a first hit. We also have Pluto at 24 degrees Capricorn. Now Pluto moves very slowly in transit, so that movement is, outer planets tend to move slowly anyway, but that one is going to be one of the slowest moving planets. So you're not going to see a dramatic impact from that as quickly, but it will be there. The other thing was that there was an opposition between Jupiter and Mars. So the natal Jupiter was directly opposed by Mars in Capricorn. So let's see, did I get everything?
Yeah, I just want to say that you'll see in the charts, Mars has been a significant trigger. And Mars and Saturn, those two dynamics and polarities have been, Saturn right over the people's money. We hit a restrictions. And then Mars is always the trigger. It was opposing Jupiter, the optimism and, the investment, the ruler, it's the country speculations and stuff. And there Mars was opposing it. So it was like the energy for the market was basically transformed and pulled back by Saturn conjuncting Pluto. So it's interesting how so significantly this lined up. This is a very critical dynamic in financial astrology, especially when Saturn goes over a planet in the second house, and then Mars opposing really the greater benefit, Jupiter, which is our expansion. It threw it in, and everything it was not only a halt, it was a dramatic drop. So what happened is Mars triggered the dramatic drop, and Saturn was to pull it into the other direction. So, okay.
So the other inflection point that we talked about was when things started to rebound. It started actually, we could see that more on the 23rd and the 24th, but the aspects started to appear here. And what happened was that Saturn went into a new sign. So Saturn had been very involved with Capricorn and going against Pluto, natal Pluto, and it moved into into Aquarius, which sort of changed the energy a little bit. And I think that allowed us to sort of start to begin to kind of recover.
Yes, one of the things too is that again, this is all affecting the second house, so that was dynamic. One thing I wanted to say: some of these charts, aspects really, when the energy is applying, that means when the aspect is getting, moving towards the exact position, be it a conjunction, opposition, you'll see that things happen sometimes either a couple days before or a couple days after. But the energy is applying when Saturn, you'll see a couple charts, especially on the 7th and 8th of May. We'll talk more about that. But when Saturn went into Aquarius, that's the air signs, and Saturn lightens up, even though its natural ruler is Capricorn. But in Capricorn, Saturn brings great responsibilities. But great challenges can bring great results too. But it lightened up in Aquarius, and so the retraction that was caused by the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn started to lighten up a little bit. And we also see that Jupiter and Mars, the transiting Jupiter and Mars, were conjuncting, and they previously had conjunct the day before, because that's where the energy dynamic was being created. And also, I think there was one other aspect that Mercury and Moon were in conjunction in Pisces, which was starting to, again, Pisces being is that people were starting to feel like maybe this will be a little better. So.
Okay. So then the next one that is actually today, this is actually the closest point that Jupiter will get to towards a conjunction with natal Pluto before it goes retrograde. It went retrograde, I think, earlier today, about 10:30 in the morning. So Jupiter, this is the closest that it gets to applying to Pluto, but it's going to move back, and then later on in the year it will come over Pluto again. So that's why I said there's this kind of interesting dance going between Jupiter and Saturn over our natal Pluto. And as you can see here, Saturn is now retrograding and it's moving back. So we've had both planets are starting to move back. Actually, all three of them are now retrograde.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to say is that Jupiter is a faster moving planet than Saturn or Pluto. Pluto is retrograde right now, so Jupiter is now going to be reapplying, even though it's retrograde, to the transiting Pluto. So the energy of Jupiter, instead of separating, is going to start applying back to Pluto. So that's going to, I see a lot of things that were not only affecting the economy, but that were kind of hidden in the deep bureaucracy may be brought out more too. And so that's because Pluto's not only the mass consciousness of groups of people, it's also things that are tied up in the structures, the deep hidden structures of society. So I think Jupiter, even though it's retrograde, it didn't quite meet that conjunction. So we're going to go back to a retrograde, and it's going to be the next direct cycle when Jupiter does conjunct. And I didn't get that exact date, but that's 3 or 4 months down the line. I guess that's several months. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So these are just some of the upcoming Saturn-Jupiter transits that are going over natal Pluto for the rest of the year. So on August 5th, the transiting Saturn will conjunct with the natal Pluto while it's going in retrograde motion. And then on November 20th, Saturn will conjunct with natal Pluto while it's moving forward. So it's going to go back. Every time, most of the times when you have retrograde motion, you go back and forward, and you hit it first and you go back, then you go forward again. So you sometimes have 3 hits on one configuration. So we'll have it go back over Pluto, and then it'll continue going direct. And then on December 7th, transiting Jupiter will conjunct with natal Pluto while it's moving forward. So that should hopefully be positive.
So critical dates that we want to look at again. Remember what happened when Saturn conjunct natal Pluto and then the market started on February 23rd, just tanking. And of course, Mars was in that configuration again. There was a Mars in it. But August 5th, we're going to have that again. So we could expect something to pull back on the energies of the natal Pluto again. And it's in the 2nd house, so there might be another readjustment happening on the 5th. Then it's going to go back, and then it's going to come forward, and it's going to be going direct. And of course, election day is November 3rd. So is it direct on November 3rd? Yeah, it'll be.
Yeah, I think it's direct. This is just when it hits the intersection.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I didn't put all those because
Yeah,
there's
so on the
actual times
7th,
where it gets.
transiting Jupiter will conjunct, and that the country will, I think that'll really start thinking, things will start really moving forward again, because it didn't make that exact conjunction beforehand, but actually on December 7th, it will, that's Pearl Harbor Day too, things will be really in gear, moving positive on December 7th. I think that we will be emerging from all the Plutonian energies that we've been seeing all this period of time.
Okay. So then the next piece we wanted to talk about has to do with the actual epidemic itself. And this was interesting because we had not really looked at epidemics before. I think the last major epidemic was 1918, the Spanish flu.
Yes, the Spanish flu.
So this is not something that Will or I had actually spent a whole lot of time thinking about. So one of our friends, Steph, mentioned that Reinhold Eberton, who is a cosmobiologist, had looked at Mars and Neptune with respect to epidemics. And I think maybe some of you remember our favorite cosmobiologist was Irmgard, and she was especially interested in midpoints. So we were looking at these charts for a while, and then one day we said, hey, wait a minute, since Eberton recommended this, let's take a look too at some of the midpoints. And that was actually very interesting. So we have more of a midpoint analysis in this section, but we thought that was appropriate given that we were using the recommendations by Eberton to do the analysis. So just a little bit of background here, because I've been tracking this kind of information for I don't know what reason. I've been tracking the deaths, actually. And so this has been kind of the cycle for the coronavirus. It's kind of interesting when you look at it. We actually are getting better, but we have this weird pattern, which they have commented on in television. Actually, Dr. Birx has commented on it. And I have a feeling that this pattern is actually due to how reporting is done, because the dips at the bottom are always on Sundays, so the lowest numbers, and the peak days are usually Wednesdays. Once it was a Tuesday, but it's usually Wednesdays, and it seems to be going sort of jagged like that, but it's gradually moving down. So we are, the numbers are dropping, which is a really good thing. So, but the pattern is kind of interesting, and it probably is recording.
The fluctuation. It's like an oscillation that's starting to move down.
Yeah, it's going down. If you look, it's going down, which is good, we're really good, happy to hear about that part. So when you look at the houses associated with healthcare, we look at the 12th, the 8th, the 7th, and the 6th. And not so much that we've been totally focused on those houses, but I just wanted to share that because that's typically when you're looking at mundane, those would be the house systems that you might find interesting. So just looking at the dates, we had our first confirmed case of COVID-19 on January 21st. And that was when we had a person that came from Wuhan, and he got sick. So they were starting to look at various, they were really starting to get more serious about it. Up until that point, people were kind of not sure what the impact was going to be. And so we looked at the astrology, and one thing we noticed was that, and again, we started using midpoints to do this, was that the transiting Mercury was opposing the midpoint of natal Neptune and natal Mars on the day before.
Just can I caveat just a little bit? In Sibley chart, now Mars is at 23 degrees Gemini, and it's squaring at 22, 25 Neptune and Virgo. The midpoint between the natal Mars and Gemini and the natal Neptune in the Sibley chart is 6 degrees Leo, thereabouts. It's not precise, but around 6 degrees. So we started looking at the 6 degree point, and of course on this date, the 20th, Mercury was exactly opposing the midpoint of that of the Mars Neptune. And on this date also, so that was one of the things. So here again, it's like a communication. The reporting started coming in of the pandemic, that it wasn't just something going to pass over. It was Mercury, the communicator, and Aquarius. Statistics and facts were starting to come in an organized way. Also on this date, and the transiting up, if you look up in the on the ascendant, the Mars and the Moon were virtually exactly conjunct. So the emotional aspect of this hit home with Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is a seeker of truth. So the truth started to really come out. What was happening? That this virus was spreading from China to the United States and the rest of the world. So that was an awakening, the Mercury awakening to the midpoint of the pandemic between Mars and Neptune, and we found that significant.
So then we actually had our first real confirmed case on the 27th. And wait a minute.
21st.
Hold on. Did I get the date wrong in here?
Well, so he started the 15th, but a week later.
Okay, yeah, it was a week later. So I'm sorry, I must have duplicated a slide. I had a double slide in here.
Yeah.
So this was, did we talk about January 27th yet?
I don't think so, no. The
okay.
27th
This was when the transiting sun was opposing the midpoint. So it's over here. Yeah.
Well, there was two things here too. Now, I think it was on the 28th that President Trump imposed the ban on travel, travel to China. And now, if you look at that, the ninth house is, and he did it on the 28th, and it went in effect on the 31st, I think. There was a little delay there. But if you look at the transiting Sun and Mercury, they were moving to the opposition point. If you take 2 or 3 days, Mercury would be exactly opposing the 24-degree ninth house cusp, and the Sun would also be there, and it would be like there would be a ban on travel from certain parts of the world. Also, Mars was in Sagittarius. It was aspecting. It wasn't opposing. It was heading towards the opposition of Mars, opposed Mars. And if you notice on the 31st, when it did go in, that the Mars opposition was coming into full effect too. So that was we took a dramatic action to try to stop the spread of the pandemic in the coronavirus 19. So that was the key aspects there that I saw on this date, is that Mercury and the Sun were moving to opposing the ninth house cusp, and that Mars was moving to the opposition of Mars. And there was one other thing too, because I looked at Uranus a lot of times as a trigger, and I think the Sun was going to actually trine the Uranus. That affects travel, and yeah, so that was affecting the
So that would have been from Uranus over here to the Sun.
And actually, it did save a lot of lives. That's what I saw. The trine of Sun to Uranus. That action started this. It was a positive action to, even though it was dramatic and it was greatly opposed, turned out to be one of the important things to stem the pandemic.
Okay, then on February 21st, we got some information that from the CDC about that they really were deciding finally they were going to call it a pandemic. There was a lot of discussion in early February about how serious is this. You heard people saying, oh, you don't have to pay any attention to it. You don't have to do anything different, just wash your hands or whatever. And then it got much more serious. And they finally had people saying that they were going to call it a pandemic. And so we looked at and this again was a midpoint analysis, and we looked at that, and we had the moon was actually opposing the midpoint between Mars and Neptune. So the midpoint's right here. Actually, technically, I think it's both midpoints, but because this midpoint is between the two here and it's smaller, we tend to look at this more as an oppositional midpoint.
Yeah, it's actually the midpoint is semi square, and if you take it the other way, it's a quintile. So it's and let's see, we were looking at some of the other aspects. There's just always things, but we were
Saturn is getting back closer.
Yeah, Saturn was actually right again within 1 degree of Pluto.
Yeah.
So
But that's more
Saturn
financial,
again,
but yeah.
yeah, it was financial, so it was starting to have an impact on the fin. And of course, was it the 23rd where it crashed? Yeah,
Yeah,
that
the
right.
23rd.
So Saturn was saying the moon triggered the 21st, recognizing, and then when Saturn crossed Pluto, there was the financial impact, and it was with that 1 degree of the Saturn Pluto aspect.
Yeah, we tried to split it into different functional areas. All this stuff is happening at the same time, but it gets a little overwhelming to try to do all that simultaneously. So then the next kind of interesting date we looked at was when they announced the lockdown, which was March 16th. And that one, when we looked at the charts for that, the day before we saw, again, looking at the midpoints, that Mars was opposing the midpoint of natal Neptune and natal Mars.
Yeah, so we went from Mercury to Mars, and again, Mars, it wasn't just a message in a report, it became an action of lockdown. It was a martial action where they set guidelines into effect. And also that means that, okay. Was there anything else there?
I think that was the key thing.
Let me just look again at the, here again, we have the sun, and the sun had crossed over Neptune into transiting energy. There was a lot of transiting energy in Pisces. So we were basically, that's a 12th house function. We were told to stay in our homes. So you see on the bottom of it, and it was moving towards the 4th house. So you had all these Pisces energies. We were being told to stay in place. And that's like the 12th house function. And it was the message. It was was protocols. And then later on, some states even did further lockdowns as it went into the 4th house. So so you can see the Pisces energy there saying it was more of a self-imposed lockdowns. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so then this was interesting because on March 21st, we heard about hydroxychloroquine, which the president actually talked about. And I had been hanging out on YouTube or something. I forget.
It was Rudy Giuliani.
Rudy Giuliani. I don't know. Something popped up on my computer.
We saw Rudy Giuliani, who had interviewed that doctor.
Yes,
who
Dr.
had
Salenko.
A success. Dr. Salenko.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting story, and I'm gonna I'm gonna just mention this for a few minutes because I feel very strongly about it. I heard the doctor talk about what happened. I don't know if all of you recall, but in the middle of March, there was one group of Orthodox Jewish folks in New York, north of New York City, just a bit. And their community got very heavily hit with the coronavirus. And they were in the news for a few days. And then a week or two later, I heard about the information from this doctor who had treated a lot of these patients. And I was fascinated because, of course, he was one of the first people to actually talk to us, and also one of the first people to have an experience with the population. So his story was really interesting. He's really fun to listen to. Well, I don't know if fun is the right word. It's interesting to listen to his story because he talks about, having all these people and being worried about them and how he determined what to do. So he went on the internet and he researched what all the other countries that were a little ahead of us had been doing. Like France and South Korea and in various places like that. And he took all the things they were doing and he sort of combined them into what he called a cocktail, which included hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and azithromycin. And he explained very nicely why he was doing that and what he thought what all the mechanisms were. And it made a lot of sense. And I was extremely excited about this. And then I heard the president talk about it too. And so I thought, well, this is really great. But the media completely trashed it. And I was shocked because the medication had been in use for like 60 years. And I know people that had given it to their children to take them on safari and vacations in Africa. And it was a 5-day course. So I was very puzzled as to why there was tremendous resistance. I'm still very puzzled because I think that people are dying needlessly. And I really have had struggled with this. So
like in the usage of it in his community, he treated 350 people. He had a protocol. If you were over 60,
yes.
he would do it. If you were under a certain age and healthy without any pre-existing conditions, he would just let your immune system take. He was successful with 350 out of 350, and he didn't lose any patients.
Yeah, so his strategy, which I thought made total sense, was he said, and I hadn't heard this before, all people have been talking about was, oh, we've got to have more respirators. We've got to have respirators. And he said, well, my goal is to not have anybody on a respirator, because if you are on a respirator, you've got, well, he said a 50-50 chance of ending up either dead or with lung damage. And he said that wasn't what I considered a good outcome. My outcome was that nobody would have to get hospitalized. So that was his goal. And so his population, he had about 1,000 patients, and 350 of them fell into this category that he thought they either had health risks or they were over the age of 60. And as soon as they were identified with having corona, he put them on a 5-day dose of this. And he said he had tremendous luck with it. And I don't know if he's had any fatalities at all, but it really sounded very good. So I think there has been, I haven't had a chance to pull down the research from the work done in France, but it was based on that.
France, they are prescribing tens of thousands of prescriptions of the hydroxychloroquine with the Z-Pak, essentially.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention this to people because I think everybody seems to have an agenda, and I don't know if it's political or if it's not invented here or if it's they want to do a fancy solution. I don't know what it is, but in the meantime, I'm really concerned that people are afraid and they need to have
I just
some other
heard today
options.
the NIH is starting to.
Are they finally?
They're finally looking into it.
Bless their hearts. It's about time. Okay. Anyway, that was that. I'm getting off my soapbox.
Okay. Okay, next chart. We're back to astrology.
Back to astrology.
Yeah, so, here's the March 22nd chart again.
Yeah, so this is the chart.
Yeah, the 0 degrees Saturn, and right around there, March 22nd, it was just transiting sign. We had the applications. I like this one too because it showed the Mars exactly posing Mercury in the chart. A lot of controversial,
the
reporting.
Media was very.
Oh, the media was
tons of media issues about this.
Yeah.
I've had people tell me that their doctors are afraid to prescribe it. I've heard worse stories too. So it's just crazy here.
Okay. Yeah. Here's this is a Sylvia Brown.
Okay. Yeah. This one I put this in once before, and I just thought this was amusing because Sylvia Brown predicted in one of her books. She died in 2013, and in her book, The End of Days, she had predicted that a respiratory illness would spread around the globe in 2020. And so I don't know if this is exactly what happened, but it was just such an interesting prediction. In around 2020, a severe pneumonia-like illness will spread through the globe, attacking the lungs and bronchial tubes and resisting all known treatments. Almost more baffling than the illness itself will be the fact that it will suddenly vanish as quickly as it appeared, attack again 10 years later, and then disappear completely. So we shall see what happens. So far, it hasn't disappeared completely, but I do think that was interesting. So then the last section, and this is we just have a couple slides.
A couple slides on the political.
On the political side.
So we're looking at Mars, Venus, and Moon.
Mostly, yeah.
Because it's the emotional fabric, and then Venus is, what we value, what's looking for, we'll say, is what is the silver lining, if there is any.
Okay, so just looking back through there on the 27th, I don't know if you would consider this a silver lining, but the first stimulus package.
Well, we'll say a Venetian attempt to make it better.
Yes, was passed, and that was that we've had several stimulus packages, but this was the first one.
It's the biggest.
And then we looked at the chart for that day, and we had that the transiting Mars in Capricorn was conjuncting the natal Pluto, which again, this is more of a money chart, but since it was more focused on the coronavirus stimulus, we stuck it in this section here.
Yeah. The big thing is too, Mars was action, initiation, to do something, and it was a big bureaucratic action, the biggest bill that we have ever passed, and it was again Pluto, the bureaucratic functionings of our, our money and also our society. And also we had Jupiter applying to the conjunction, transiting Jupiter to Pluto and Capricorn within 1 degree. So you got the energy applying. So we had that nice Jupiter-Pluto transiting energy, feeding into the Mars conjunct Pluto at that time.
Okay, and then from political side, we had a whole bunch of events that happened on May 7th. One that's still being dealt with, which is the DOJ dropping the criminal case against Michael Flynn. And then there was a huge release of transcripts that were associated with the election in 2016. So a lot of people were interviewed and they finally got the information out about the interviews. Yeah. So we looked at the chart. We actually looked at the May 8th chart for that. And
the energies were within 1 degree on the 7th, and that's where it was initiated. But the May 8th chart shows
when all the action is happening.
And actually it shows the exact aspects of the Mars to the moon, and that the emotional fabric of the country was really charged up, because the moon is like the soul, the emotional fabric of the country, and Mars is the emotional dynamic energy, and it just kicked right in. It was quite a day. And then there were some other aspects.
We also had this the transiting Mercury sextile natal Mercury. So again, a lot of media communication.
Oh yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah. See, Mercury to Mercury.
Mercury to Mercury.
Yeah, the Mercury from the transiting Taurus into Cancer, and then we also had Venus exactly conjunct Mars too. So there was a lot of dynamic Mars energy to the Venus energy, and Venus is in Gemini, so that's communications. So we had a ton of reports that were actually sent out, and basically, it was the first time we were able to see, the American people were able to see the behind the doors testimonies.
Okay, and this last chart, this is actually, I think, our last chart. This is a little bit more in the future. This is June 13th. And how we came up with this particular chart was we originally were looking at it from a different perspective. And then we noticed it actually mapped to Donald Trump's solar return chart within about 2 hours. So we decided to just look at this from that perspective, because there's a whole lot of action happening that day. And, we have aspects, things going on between conjunctions here with the transiting Mars and Venus, and then Neptune, and then it's not that far from the moon. And then of course we have aspects that the natal Neptune, why do I keep doing Venus? The natal Neptune, it's within 2 degrees. Now they're slow moving planets, so it actually, Neptune is not going to oppose Neptune until next year.
Yeah, but the moon on this day would crossed over earlier that day, and Mars was moving towards the exact. So we had this Piscean energy, this dynamic Mars and Neptune moon, and they're very water. I mean, Mars, Neptune, and moon, if you take classical, are all water planets in Pisces, opposing the Neptune and Virgo. But it's a very dynamic energy. It's a balancing act happening between the vision of the country, Neptune, in the 9th house, and all this dynamic energy in Pisces opposing. So that was very powerful. Then there was other aspects.
Yeah, so then we also have Venus conjuncting the natal Uranus, and transiting Mercury conjuncting the sun. So
exactly, and the thing is, these are very exact degrees on his solar return. And again, the president is very karmically and dynamically tied into the soul of the country. And it's always fascinating to see these exact aspects happening on a very important day, his solar return day.
Well, and you've commented before about how anyone who becomes president has a soul connection with the country.
Yes, it's a cosmic destiny. Every president of the United States has a cosmic destiny tied into the country. And this is a very cosmic destiny type of chart on June 13th for his solar return, because you have the Mercury conjunct the sun. I mean, you have conjunctions, oppositions, and just look at the dynamic energy of the Pluto.
We still have
we still have the Pluto Jupiter in Capricorn opposing the country's Mercury and Cancer. So there's going to be a lot of interesting press releases
Yeah,
that day
we're never
too.
going to stop with the press. The press is going to be.
Oh, there's going to be. I mean,
it's going to be very.
I'm going to tell you, the airwaves are going to be filled that day, and it's just dynamic. So this is extreme. Didn't you see a mystic rectangle? You want to call it?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, we also have a mystic rectangle in here.
Yeah, Wendy saw this.
Yeah, I saw that. And it consists of 2 sextiles, 2 trines, and then 2 oppositions. So it's actually, this one is this mystic rectangle is what they call a feminine one, because it is water and earth, but it's supposed to be a lot about balance, though that I think the challenges are kind of managing the oppositions and all that, but leveraging the sextiles and the trines to kind of pull it all together.
Bottom line is, this is a cosmically dynamic interaction happening on Donald Trump's solar return. So, and of course, the emergence of the solar return, he's out of his, we'll say, his 12th house period, which he's when he is going in, starting the new solar year for him. So it's the 13th is a day to watch. And that's less than a month away now.
Yep, it's getting there.
Okay.
So anyway, we're going to stop sharing now, and thank you all very much.